At that moment when I was in the hospital bed, I knew something was terribly wrong. I closed my eyes, seeking a temporary escape from that agony. Suddenly, I felt an unusual lightness. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was no longer in the hospital. I was floating in a vast, dark space, surrounded by bright and colorful stars. The feeling of freedom was indescribable. I no longer felt pain. There was no more weight on my body. I was free from the physical limitations that had tormented me so much. It was an incredible moment, and today I'm going to tell you a bit of my story. My name is Marcos. I was 46 years old at the time. The night was beginning to fall, and I was preparing for another shift at Emergency Unit 12 in the city of River of Stones. The air was heavy, filled with the distant murmur of sirens and the tension that hung over all of us. The city was going through a severe health crisis, with a highly contagious respiratory infection spreading rapidly. There was no time to rest. The emergency never slept, and neither could we. My colleagues and I were exhausted, but our determination never wavered. That night, we attended numerous calls, each bringing a new story, a new fight for life. The clock was nearing midnight when we received an urgent call. An elderly lady, alone in her apartment, needed help. It was another life that depended on us, and we couldn't fail. We arrived quickly at the scene. The building was old. The narrow corridors echoed our hurried footsteps. The apartment door was slightly open, and the environment was gloomy, with the curtains drawn, blocking any external light. The lady was lying in her bed, breathing with difficulty. Her face showed signs of suffering, but also relief at seeing us. We approached quickly, prepared to do whatever was necessary to stabilize her. As I adjusted the oxygen mask on her face, I felt a slight exhalation of air coming towards me. I didn't pay much attention at the time, focused on helping the woman. However, that slight exposure would prove to be more significant than I could have imagined. We finished the assistance and took her to the nearest hospital, leaving her in the care of the medical team. In the following days, I began to feel the symptoms. A mild fever, which quickly turned into a high fever, accompanied by a cough and a feeling of extreme fatigue. I was admitted to the hospital, and the situation only got worse. My colleagues and family were worried, but I tried to stay calm, trusting that the doctors knew what to do. Then, on a dark night, my condition deteriorated drastically. I was struggling to breathe. Each breath was a battle. I felt my body weaken, and the last thing I remember was closing my eyes, hoping that, somehow, all of that would pass. It was at that moment that my extraordinary journey began. Hospitalized in critical condition, each day was a battle. The doctors tried everything to stabilize my condition. They administered different medications, but my state continued to worsen. The high fever wouldn't subside, and the cough became increasingly severe. I felt my body weaken more and more, as if I was losing the fight against an invisible force. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. There was one night in particular when everything changed. I was lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines monitoring my vital signs. My breathing was shallow, and each breath felt like an eternity. I felt excruciating pain in my lungs, and my body was consumed by fatigue. At that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. I closed my eyes, seeking a temporary escape from that agony. Suddenly, I felt an unusual lightness. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was no longer in the hospital. I was floating in a vast, dark space, surrounded by bright and colorful stars. The feeling of freedom was indescribable. I no longer felt pain. There was no more weight on my body. I was free from the physical limitations that had tormented me so much. As I floated, I saw three small figures dressed in dark cloaks. Their faces were partially covered, but I could see warm smiles and bright eyes. They seemed familiar, as if I knew them from somewhere. A tall, radiant figure approached, radiating a sense of love and acceptance that overwhelmed me. The intensity of this love was so great that it almost made me cry with joy. The beings began to ask questions and laughed with me, creating an atmosphere of relaxation and total acceptance. I felt a deep connection with them, something that went beyond human understanding. As they spoke, I realized they were showing me that my journey was not over, that there was more to be lived and learned. The tall figure, with a gentle smile, told me it was time to go back. At that moment, reluctantly, I felt my surroundings begin to dematerialize. The reality around me dissolved into a whirlwind of colors and lights. I felt a vertiginous descent, as if I was being pulled back into my body. It was an intense and frightening sensation. In an instant, I was back lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and worried doctors. I was weak, but I was alive. I woke up in the hospital bed, surrounded by a symphony of beeps from the machines monitoring my vital signs. I was weak, each movement required monumental effort. I felt like I was coming back to life, emerging from a deep dream. My mind was still confused, trying to understand what had happened. The worried faces of doctors and nurses around me reflected the gravity of the situation I had been through. As my vision cleared, a nurse approached and asked how I was. I told her about the luminous figures, the welcoming stars, and the sense of peace I had experienced. She listened attentively but seemed skeptical, as if my words were just fever-induced delusions. However, I knew that it had been real, more real than anything I had ever experienced before. In the following days, my recovery was slow but steady. I reflected on my experience, trying to find meaning in what I had gone through. I sought answers in spirituality, in books, and in accounts from other people who had also had near-death experiences. Each story I read, each testimony I heard, reinforced the certainty that there was something beyond the life we know. My wife and children were my greatest support during this phase. They believed in me, even when it seemed difficult to understand. I shared with them every detail of my experience, and together, we tried to understand what it meant for us as a family. It was a journey of discovery and acceptance, which brought us even closer. During my reflections, I realized that the near-death experience had profoundly changed my perspective on life and death. Before, I was afraid of the unknown, of the uncertainty that death brought. Now, I saw death not as an end, but as a transition, a passage to a place of peace and love. This new vision brought immense comfort and serenity to my heart. From that moment on, I felt the need to share my story with the world. I wanted people to know that death was not something to fear, but a continuation of our journey. I decided to use my experience to help those who were suffering from the loss of loved ones, to show them that their loved ones were not really lost, but rather by our side, in a different form. The following days were full of introspection. As my health improved, I felt a growing need to deeply understand what had happened to me. Every moment of silence was filled with reflections on my near-death experience and the impact it had on my life. The idea that there was something beyond the physical life we know was both comforting and intriguing. I began to seek accounts from other people who had gone through similar experiences. I read books, watched documentaries, and participated in support groups. In each story, I found a piece of the puzzle that helped me put together a clearer vision of what I had experienced. It was as if each account brought a new perspective, a new understanding of what might exist beyond our material world. During this period, my connection with my family deepened. We shared long conversations about life, death, and what might lie beyond. My wife and children were my safe harbor, always ready to listen and support. Together, we tried to find meaning in the experience that had transformed our lives in such a profound and unexpected way. One night, while looking at the starry sky, I felt an immense peace take over me. I remembered the colorful stars that welcomed me during the near-death experience and realized that they were always there, watching, waiting. The feeling of being connected to something greater than myself brought an indescribable comfort. It was as if I had reconnected with an old friend, someone who had always been by my side, even when I couldn't see them. I decided it was time to share my story with others. I wanted everyone to know that death was not the end, but a transition to something greater and more beautiful. I started giving talks in support groups, sharing my experience on social media, and participating in podcasts. Each time I told my story, I felt an inner peace grow. It was as if, by sharing, I was helping to ease the suffering of others who were also seeking answers. From that moment on, my life gained a new purpose. It was no longer just about me, but about all those who were struggling with the pain of loss and the fear of the unknown. My near-death experience became a guiding light, illuminating the path for those seeking peace and understanding. And so, I began to live each day with renewed gratitude, knowing that my journey had a much greater meaning than I could ever have imagined. As my health improved, I felt a deep inner transformation occurring. The near-death experience had opened my eyes to a new reality, one I had never considered before. Each day was a new opportunity to explore this new perspective and discover more about what it means to be alive. I felt more connected to the world around me, appreciating the small things that had previously gone unnoticed. One of the first changes I noticed was my relationship with time. Before, I lived in a rush, always hurried, trying to fulfill all my responsibilities. Now, I understood that time was a precious gift, which should be appreciated and not wasted. I began to value simple moments, like a sunset, a conversation with a friend, or a stranger's smile. Each moment seemed filled with meaning. This new perspective also brought me an even greater sense of compassion and empathy. I had always had a desire to help others, but now this desire was fueled by a deeper understanding of the fragility and beauty of life. I became more involved in volunteer work, helping those who were going through difficult times. I felt that my experience could offer comfort and hope to those struggling with pain and loss. I began to realize that my near-death experience was not just an individual journey, but also a collective one. Every person I met, every story I heard, contributed to a greater understanding of what it means to be human. It was as if we were all connected by an invisible thread, intertwined in a web of shared experiences and emotions. This perception brought a sense of unity and peace to my life. My journey also led me to explore spirituality in a deeper way. I began to meditate regularly, seeking that inner connection I had experienced during my near-death experience. Meditation became a daily practice, a moment of silence and introspection that helped me maintain calm and balance. I discovered that through meditation, I could access a state of peace and clarity that reminded me of the welcoming stars I encountered on my journey. Over time, I realized that my near-death experience had become an essential part of who I was. It shaped my worldview, my relationships, and my choices. It was as if I had been given a new beginning, an opportunity to live life more fully and meaningfully. And so, I began to embrace each day with gratitude, knowing that my journey was far from over. From that moment on, my life had a renewed purpose. The near-death experience was not just an isolated event, but a catalyst for a profound change in my worldview and my life's mission. I began to see each day as an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of those around me. My goal was to share the peace and love I had experienced and help others find the same serenity. I decided to dedicate my time to working with people who were facing difficult times. In support groups, I shared my story with those who had lost loved ones. I knew that my experience could offer immense comfort to those struggling with grief and pain. Every time I told my story, I felt a deep connection with people, a mutual understanding that transcended words. My journey also led me to explore new forms of spirituality. I studied different traditions and practices, seeking a deeper understanding of what it means to be connected to something greater. Meditation became an essential part of my life, a moment of quiet and introspection that allowed me to access the inner peace I had found during my near-death experience. Through meditation, I could feel the presence of the welcoming stars, as if they were always by my side, guiding me. As my understanding of the spiritual world deepened, I began to realize that my mission was not just to help the living, but also to honor those who had passed away. I organized remembrance ceremonies and celebrations of life, creating spaces where people could honor the memory of their loved ones and find comfort in the idea that they were in a place of peace and love. These ceremonies were moments of healing and connection, both for the participants and for me. My relationship with my own mortality also changed profoundly. Before, the idea of death filled me with fear and uncertainty. Now, I saw death as a natural transition, a continuation of the soul's journey. This understanding brought immense serenity to my life. I began to live each day with gratitude, appreciating each moment as a precious gift. Death was no longer an enemy, but a companion that reminded me of the beauty and fragility of life. And so, my life mission became clear. I was here to share my experience, help others find peace and love, and live each day with an open and grateful heart. My journey was far from over, and I knew there was much more to learn and share. But one thing was certain: I would never see life the same way again. Each day was a new opportunity to love, learn, and grow, and I was determined to make every moment count. My near-death experience was a watershed moment in my life. It showed me that life is a precious gift and that death is not the end, but a new beginning. Every day I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose and gratitude. I decided that I would live life fully, honoring each moment and helping others find peace and understanding. The years went by, and my story continued to resonate with those who heard it. People came to me, shared their own experiences, and sought solace in my words. Together, we formed a support community where pain and loss were faced with love and compassion. Each conversation, each smile, reinforced the belief that we were all connected by something greater. My relationship with spirituality deepened even further. I continued to explore different traditions and practices, always seeking a deeper understanding of what it means to be connected to the universe. Meditation, remembrance ceremonies, and deep conversations became integral parts of my life. With each practice, I felt closer to the welcoming stars I encountered during my experience. The journey of sharing my story took me to places I never imagined. I traveled to different cities and countries, meeting incredible people and learning from their stories. Each new experience was an opportunity for growth and learning, a reminder that life is full of surprises and wonders. And through it all, I maintained the certainty that I was never alone. I came to realize that my life mission was more than just sharing my story. It was about living authentically, with an open and loving heart. Every act of kindness, every word of comfort, was a way to honor the experience that transformed me. And so, I began to see the beauty in each day, appreciating the little things that make life worthwhile. The journey continues. Each day is a new opportunity to love, learn, and grow. And as long as I continue to share my story and help others find peace and understanding, I know I am fulfilling my purpose. The near-death experience taught me that life is a wonderful gift and that no matter what we face, there is always something greater and more beautiful waiting for us beyond the horizon.